Shalom, Izzy here with Holy Language Institute at holylanguage.com. I wanted to talk with you for a couple of minutes about rain, rain in Israel, about the early and latter rains and what that actually was and is, and also about what we do when it rains. Because we have two responses, and one of them, I believe, is a little reminder of the future resurrection. I also want to share with you a really old Jewish prayer for rain, because it's when it comes to the resurrection, it's profound. So this is interesting. Average yearly precipitation of some different countries. You'll see here we have Sudan, which is in Africa and is a desert country, and it gets this is in millimeters, about that much rain per year. If you look just over to the left, you'll see that the next country up is Israel. Israel only gets a little more rain than Sudan. That may surprise you. Considering if you've ever been to Israel, it doesn't really look like a desert. Most of Israel is really quite green. Now, what's interesting here is they have the West Bank and Gaza as a separate country. And you will see here that the West Bank and Gaza get even less rain. So if we were to combine this entry with this entry, Israel would maybe even be behind Sudan, or somewhere very close anyways. So that may surprise you that Israel gets so little rain. Now, you know, if you're familiar with how Israel works, then you may be familiar with how they store a lot of rain in the Sea of Galilee. It's kind of the big freshwater reservoir. And that's measured. And sometimes it gets low, depending on the year and how much rain they get, which can be a stressful thing. In ancient times, this was a big deal. If you didn't get enough rain for several years in a row, then you didn't have anything to eat and you died. And so, not surprisingly, there are special prayers in the Jewish tradition of prayer, which of course is rooted in the nation of in the actual country of Israel, which originally was agricultural. There are some prayers that are rooted in that kind of history. So I wanted to. I'll show you another couple of pictures here first. Okay, so you've probably heard about the early and late rains. They're mentioned in the Torah several times, and they're one of the blessings that God says He will give to Israel. And let's make our arrow stay visible. There we go. So this is what the rainfall looks like. This is average rainfall in Jerusalem, or I should say precipitation, because there is the occasional snowfall. So rain picks up in October, increases throughout November and December, hits its height in January, and then begins decreasing. So basically, Sukkot, the festival of booths, is right around October, and rain starts around then, and then Passover is in the spring, and that's right around when the rains stop. It's pretty neat how that works. Here's a chart of not just of average temperatures and sunshine in Jerusalem, but of how much rain Jerusalem receives. And I was actually surprised when I looked at this to discover that on average Jerusalem doesn't even get 22 inches of rain a year. That really is a desert quantity right there. All right, so having given you a little overview of how it works with rain in Israel. Oh, I don't know if I really answered the question though, did I? Okay, the early rains, that would happen, in the fall. In fact, if you look in the New American Standard Version, there are a couple places where they actually translate that phrase as early rains, but usually they translate it autumn rains, because otherwise we don't really know what it's talking about. And then the later rains would happen, towards the end of the winter here. So that's what the early and the latter rains are. So this is the first verse in a tractate called Ta'anit. Ta'anit means to fast. So this is about when the Jewish community would fast, and one of those times is if it wouldn't rain, the whole Jewish community would fast. And this would happen on specific days, and there were certain prayers that were said, and the shofar would be blown. And if the months went on and the rain didn't fall, then it would get more intense, the fasting and the prayers. But there's one little prayer for rain that is said every day in the Amidah. It's the Amidah is, it comes from the Hebrew word to stand, because you pray it standing up. It may have been what Yeshua was touched on when he said in Matthew chapter 5, if you are standing praying and you remember that someone has something against you. So that's the word, that's the name for this prayer, the Amidah. And it's made up of 18 little prayers or blessings. The Hebrew word for 18 is Shmona Esrei. And so sometimes this prayer is also called the Shmona Esrei. So basically, every day there would be this little prayer for rain that would be inserted into the Amidah, the standing prayer of Shmona Esrei, 18 blessings. And so there's a question about when do we start? When do we start praying for rain? Again, that's a big question if your survival depends on that rain. And not surprisingly, maybe you've heard the expression 2 Jews, 3 opinions. That's especially true when it comes to rabbis. So you have a couple of the sages of the Jewish community around the end of the Second Temple era and the beginning of the exile. And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about their different opinions about when it should start. So one rabbi says, well, we should start from the beginning of the Festival of Tabernacles. The thing is, if you're camping out in a tabernacle with an relatively open roof, you don't really want it to rain until the end of Tabernacles. And sure enough, that is the agreed upon view, Rabbi Joshua's view, that you should start praying from the last festival Sabbath or holy day of the Festival of Tabernacles. And specifically, this is the line, and this is a fun little discussion too, because Rabbi Eliezer has to do a little backpedaling, which he does really quite well. But this is the line that is said. In the English it says, "Who causes the wind to blow and the rain to fall." And I want to show you that in Hebrew here, because it's beautiful, and also because it's something that is still prayed today in the Amidah. So it says Mashiv. That's like who makes to breathe or to blow. Ha-ruach, which is neat. It's the ruach, because ruach, here it means wind, but it also means breath, and it also means spirit. And so there's this concept of like the wind blowing, the breath breathing, the spirit. Umorid, and who makes to fall. Hagashem. So that's the Geshem, the rain. So Geshem is a nice word. It means rain. And so this is the little line. Now, I want to show you here, for show and tell today, I brought my Siddur. It's my prayer book, and it has lots of prayers in it. And some of them are literally our psalms, and then many of them are psalm-like. Some people don't like the Jewish tradition of prayer because we pray the same prayers on a regular basis. They say, I like to just be spontaneous and just pray whatever comes to mind. But if you listen to those people pray, they usually end up saying the same things. They just kind of hash it up a little bit. And they usually end up singing the same songs too in their worship services. They just mix them up a little bit too. So it gives this sense of spontaneity. But really we all, I think it's safe to say that we all pray liturgically, whether we're Jewish or not, whether we pray the Jewish prayers or we pray in a more Christian fashion. And the Psalms are a wonderful prayer book of the prayer book of Israel and of Bible believers in general. And really the Siddur is an extension of the book of Psalms and that tradition of prayer. So I'd mentioned the Amidah, the prayer that's prayed standing. It's also called the Shmona Esrei, the 18 blessings. So you can see that right there. It's called both. And then there's the first blessing, which is called Avot. It's about acknowledging God as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He said that's something we should remember him as forever. The second one is acknowledging how powerful God is. Specifically, he's so powerful that he gives life to everybody, and he's even going to give life to all the dead people, and he's going to bring them back to life. He's going to resurrect them. So the second blessing is about the resurrection of the dead. And interestingly enough, this is a Pharisaic doctrine. There were some sects in ancient Israel who didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead, like the Sadducees. The Pharisees were the champions of this doctrine. And so, sometimes the Pharisees are touted as the bad guys in the story. Some of them were. Yeshua said some of them were very hypocritical and they had their own set of issues, but not all of them. Not everything that the Pharisees taught was bad. For instance, the resurrection of the dead, that's a Pharisaic doctrine that made its way into Christianity. And so if you believe in the resurrection of the dead, then you're a little bit of a Pharisee, and not in a bad way either. All right, anyways, so what's neat about this prayer is that smack dab in the middle of the prayer about God raising the dead, we have this line. Let's see if we can make this actually focus. Who makes the wind blow and makes the rain descend. There it is. So it's really neat that we have this Mishnah, which was written down almost 2,000 years ago and reflects an even earlier Jewish tradition. And this is still a line that's prayed by the Jewish people today. Now, I want to chat about one more thing with you. Have you ever been out in the rain before? Maybe you've been outdoors and suddenly the rain started falling. What did you do? Generally speaking, we have two responses to the rain. Usually, we act scared. So we're like, oh no, I'm going to get wet. Oh, it's cold. And so we act scared and we kind of like try and, protect ourselves from the rain, and we run away. We run for shelter. And that's a good survival instinct, because if you never did that, then you could possibly get hypothermia and freeze to death. And you don't want that to happen. So that's a good instinct. But have you ever noticed that we also have another response to the rain sometimes? Maybe it's a dry spell and you're a farmer and you really need the rain. And finally the storm clouds roll in, and you can hear the thunderclap. And I think we've all seen scenes like this in movies before, a TV show, where like what happens? What do people do? The rain starts to fall, and you can see the drops impacting the dry, dusty earth and begin to moisten them. And everyone runs out of the doors fly open, and people go running outside, and there are these huge smiles on their faces. They're just beaming with joy. And what do? They throw their hands up in the air, and they lift their hands up. And maybe you've experienced this for yourself, the feeling of the rain falling on your head and then trickling down through your hair and down your face and soaking your skin. And it's cold, but at the same time, it energizes you and it wakes you up so deeply, and you can't help but maybe shout. And you're laughing, and you with your face turned upward, and maybe your hands go up in the air, and maybe you're spinning around or dancing. Either we've seen people who have done this, or we've done this. It's a very, very deep human response to rain. It's almost like one of these instinctual things that we do. And it makes me wonder why. It makes me wonder if there isn't something to that we were hardwired to do by our Creator as a sign of the future. What if there's something about that that's actually a picture of the resurrection? What if that's what it's going to feel like? What if when Messiah comes, God's power is going to come down, and it's going to wash through the cosmos, and it's going to come washing over planet Earth, and the dead are going to wake up and just snap back to consciousness, and maybe that's what it's going to feel like the rain falling. Maybe not a cold, harsh rain, but a warm rain of the love of God. And you can just imagine millions of people jumping up with their faces turned upward and their hands in the air, laughing and dancing the way we do when the rain falls. So, having said that and getting you imagining that, I want to show you some pictures of people responding to the rain, and I want to read you this blessing from the Amidah, the one about God's power to raise the dead. And hopefully, if you pray in a Jewish way, hopefully this will give you a new appreciation for this blessing, and hopefully it'll just give you some hope as you think about the future, and that the best is yet to be for us. All right, so here's our first picture, and this is a great picture of what we do. The way I just described that. I'm a very visual person, so maybe you are too, and it helps you just picture this. Okay, so I'm gonna read these lines in Hebrew and then translate them into English, and I'll even do it in a spirit of prayer. And I'd like you to join me in a spirit of prayer and just praising God for his power and for his ruach, for his breath, for his wind, for his spirit, who gives life to all of us and who ultimately is going to raise the dead. Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai. You are powerful forever, my master. Mechaye Meitim Ata. You are the one who revives, who resuscitates, who gives life to the dead. Rav Lahoshia. You're abundantly able to save. And then here's our line in the prayer. Mashiv Hawuach, who makes the wind to blow, who makes the breath, the spirit to breathe. Umorid Hageshem, and who makes the rain come down. Mechalkel Chaim B'chesed, who sustains the living with kindness. Mechaye Meitim, who here in this version it says who resuscitates the dead. And just a little note so you don't think that I'm a heretic. When we talk about the resuscitation of the dead, in English often when we use that phrase, it's someone who's almost dead and then they're brought back, maybe by emergency response team or something. But in this context, it's talking about people who are really dead, not people who have almost died and then they're brought back, but people who are really dead. That kind of resuscitation. So, Mechaye Meitim, who resuscitates the dead, Barachamim Rabim, with abundant mercy. Somech Noflim, who supports the fallen. V'rofei Cholim, and who heals the sick. Umatil Asurim, and who looses Asurim, those who are bound, who looses the bound, who releases the confined. Umekayem emunato lishenei afal, and who maintains his faith, his faithfulness to those who sleep in the dust. And I love this word here for maintains. It says mekayem emunato, who maintains his faith or his faithfulness, because that's also the word for raising. It has the sense of like maintaining or establishing, and it also has the sense of like the word for getting up, like is kum. So it's related to that word, to kum, to get up, and that's the Hebrew word for the resurrection of the dead. One of the Hebrew words for the resurrection of the dead, it's from the word chaya, which means to live or to give life. That has the sense of reviving or resuscitating. And then another one of these words is kum, and that means to get up, to raise. And so the word for that is tekuma. So we have two Hebrew, we actually have more than two, but two of the big Hebrew words is the techiyat hametim, that's like the revival or resuscitation of the dead when they're given life, and then we have the tekumat hametim, which is the actual raising of the dead. When they stand up on their feet, they get up. All right. So anyways, it's very beautiful because it's like God keeps faith by the Hebrew word is like to raise faith, but that's also the word for the resurrection. Okay, so he does that. Mi chamocha ba'al gevurot. Who is like you, master of powerful actions and mighty deeds? Umi domelach. And who resembles you? Melech memit, umechaya, the king who causes death and brings life. Umatzmiach, Yeshua, and who makes salvation, Yeshua, to sprout. And how powerful is that? That in the blessing for the resurrection of the dead, God's Yeshua, God's salvation, is mentioned. V'neh manata, and faithful are you, lahachayot meitim, to revive the dead. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, Lord. Mechayeh hameitim, who revives the dead. Somebody say Amen. So, there's a day that will come when what rain is a picture of something, and what it's a picture of is going to happen. And on that day, the dead are going to come back to life, and that includes you and me, if we've died between now and then, and we are going to become real people in every sense of the word. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that brings joy to your heart. If you pray Jewishly, I hope that gives you a new appreciation for that particular section in the Amidah. And if you don't, I hope it sparks your interest, honestly. And I hope that just gives you a new hope also, as you think not just about the present, but as you think about the future also, and that really the best is yet to be. And I wanted to leave you with this gorgeous picture that I found as I was looking for pictures of precipitation in Israel. On rare occasions, Jerusalem gets snow, and this was an example of this. I actually made it my desktop, my wallpaper for my computer, because it's just so beautiful. Of course, I come from Saskatchewan, Canada, so I have a love-hate relationship with snow, but I can definitely appreciate the beauty of it. So thanks for joining me in this conversation. This was actually just a takeaway from my most recent Mishnah Snapshots lesson. I'm doing a long series of lessons looking at vignettes from the writings of the Mishnah. You know, the Mishnah is some of the oldest Jewish history on record. It's some of the oldest records that we have of how the Torah was lived out by the nation of Israel in the Second Temple era. So, you know, if you want to better understand the Jewish world of Jesus and his disciples, if you want to better understand the Jewish context of the New Testament, the Mishnah is a great place to go. And basically what I'm doing, I'm not going through it systematically, because a lot of it is nitty-gritty law and you know, details that most people would find really quite boring. You know, not everybody, but a lot of people. So I'm not going through all that. I'm just hitting the highlights that help us to better understand the New Testament and hopefully give you a richer and more personal view of Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Jesus of Nazareth. So if you're interested in learning with me, I'd love to have you. Come see me at holylanguage.com, and you can learn with the Holy Language Institute community, and you can work through this Mishnah Snapshot series with me. Like I said, this was one takeaway. We covered lots more stuff in the full-length lesson, and I'd love to have you join me. And you know what? Even if you watch these lesson takeaways on a regular basis and you get something out of them, I'd like to invite you to become a member, just as your way of supporting what we're doing at Holy Language Institute. So anyways, thanks again for joining me, and I hope that it brings great joy to your heart as you think about the next time it rains. I want you to go out there, and I want you to go and spin around in the rain and laugh and dance, and remember that that's what you're going to be doing in the future when Messiah returns also.